Today is Saturday, June 17th, 2017. My name is Trey Gaines, and I'm here at the home of Bob and Barbara Bentley in Cartersville, Georgia. I'm speaking today with Bob Bentley about his early life and then his career in the Navy, and then talking about his career here in Bartow County in Cartersville with the Etowah Foundation. Thank you, Bob, for sitting down with me here this morning and agreeing to record this interview. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Well, let's start off just for the record, if you could give us your full name.
Okay, Robert E. Bentley.
Bob, where were you born?
I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, September the 3rd, 1935.
And who were your parents?
My dad was Edward J. Bentley, and my mother was Minnie Ree Bentley.
What was your mother's name?
Minnie Ree.
Minnie, okay.
That's my grandmother's doing. Yeah.
So what were they like, your parents? What were they like, and what kind of jobs did they have?
Okay, they were just what I'd call typical Americans. My dad was never finished high school, but he did go on and get some undergraduate work done during World War II before the war really broke out in North Carolina. He was working with Southern Bread and Cake, which is no longer in existence, but he's got his accounting was his area, and he ended up going to secretary and treasurer of that company before he retired. But and then my mother was a graduate of a girls' high school in Atlanta, and they both lived and met each other in Kirkwood, which was a prominent little subdivision, and it still is in Atlanta. And then they got married, and then came along, and she had me, and they moved in with my grandmother, who had a boarding house in Kirkwood, and they lived there for a few years before they got out to a little house of their own. So I started in Kirkwood, Georgia.
And where's Kirkwood?
It's a suburb of Atlanta.
Yeah.
You know where the Majestic restaurant is down there? That's that's the Virginia Highlands area. So I grew up in Virginia Highlands.
Okay.
I had more fun in Virginia Highlands. So.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I got a brother, John, and I got a sister, Karen. And John is 8 years younger than I am, and Karen is 10 years younger than I am.
And I know Karen lives here in Bartow County.
Yes, she does.
John also live here?
No, he's retired now. He was with the National Guard for years and years and retired from the National Guard. And he and his wife live down in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you grew up Virginia Highlands.
Yeah.
Where did you go to high school?
Grady High School.
Grady?
Yeah, yeah. Graduated from Grady. I won't say when, but it was a long time ago. I really loved Grady and that community down there. We went to church down there, and it was near where my grandmother lived, and we lived with my grandmother for a while in an apartment that she had, and I've got nothing but wonderful, warm memories of Virginia Highlands and that whole thing, because I could take off on a Saturday on my bicycle and go to Emory University, to the Egyptian Museum. And my parents had no idea where I was or what I was doing, but it was a great way to grow up.
What did you most enjoy about high school?
I guess one of the things I enjoyed the most, I got interested in the military early on when I was in high school, and I was in ROTC for 4 years. And so when I was there at Grady, I was in the Army ROTC unit down there. And my senior year, we were in a drill competition, and my company won the best company and best squad. And the guy from Georgia Tech was grading us there, and he really was very complimentary of the whole organization. At the same time, I was involved with Civil Air Patrol. A lot of kids that know about that. And I had some good friends that I knew in the Civil Air Patrol, and one of them was a guy from Noonan, and he was kind of my best friend. And he was in his first year at North Georgia when I met him, and he had his pilot's license. And we used to go out to Dobbins Air Force Base, and we would get an L5, Civil Air Patrol here, and we would go flying together. And here were two teenagers flying in this L5 out of Dobbins Air Force Base, and we had a great time. But those are the sort of things that I was involved with. I was involved in the doing.
What was your friend's name?
His first name was George, and I can't remember his last name right now, but he was from Noonan, and he was a great guy. He went to North Georgia College and encouraged me to get up there, and I got accepted at North Georgia after I graduated from Grady. And I was going to get ready to go up there, and he called me. He said, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to West Point." And I said, George, what do you mean you're going? We're buddies, and you taught me to go into North Georgia, and you tell me you're going to desert me and go to West Point. What a friend you are.
That's right.
Right.
But you forgave him.
Pardon me?
But you forgave him.
Yeah, I did. I sure did. He was a great guy. We had a good time together, and he taught me a lot of good things. He was an excellent pilot for a young guy like that, and he had a wonderful attitude.
But it was him that got you really hooked on flying?
Yeah, he did. He really did. And then the drill team thing was the same thing with Civil Air Patrol, and we went to state, and we went to national competitions in that drill team, and then. As I said, my senior year at high school, I won the city competition for drill team in Atlanta with my company and a squad. Had a squad also, and so those were all good experiences for me. They really were. I really decided that's what I wanted. I didn't know exactly where I was going to plug into the military, but I knew I was going to go into the military somewhere.
So you graduated from Grady.
Yep.
And you got accepted into
North Georgia.
North Georgia.
Yeah.
And your friend decided to move on to West Point. Did you go ahead and go to North Georgia?
No, but when I was a senior down there, they opened the Air Force Academy, and I had some people at the Civil Air Patrol that really wanted me to apply for that. Well, I applied for it, but I didn't have the academic background, and I knew that. I didn't have that, so the Air Force was very wise not to accept me. But that was a very competitive thing, because that was the first Air Force Academy class and everything. But I really enjoyed it, and I went to several camps with Civil Air Patrol and Air Force bases, and the more I got involved in the military, the Air Force and the Army, the more I said, this is what I want.
And so what was the next step?
Well, I guess the next step was, while I was at North Georgia, I was doing a research paper, and being a very studious guy and very much an academic, I was doing a research paper on Jesse James.
Jesse James.
Yeah. And he's an interesting person,
Sure.
by the way. I finished that thing, I was wrapping up, and they're closing the library up, and I saw this magazine on the kind of thing on it. It says, Naval Aviation News. I said, I wonder what that is. And I started leafing through it, and there was an article on it that says, if you have 2 years of college, I said, that's me. If you can pass the physical, the aptitude tests, and then you can go into the NAVCAD program, and in 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, you can be a naval aviator flying for the United States Navy. And I said, that's for me. And I called my mother and dad that night, and I said, I'm coming home this weekend. And they said, why? I said, because I'm going to join the Navy. And my dad said, you're going to what? So anyway, I had two buddies of mine. We went home and went down and took the physical and everything that weekend, took all the aptitude tests. All three of us were accepted. And I'm the only one of the three that made it all the way through that to get a commission in wings and start a career in the Navy.
What were those aptitude tests and physicals like?
Yeah, they were aptitude tests. They were done by the Navy and refined every year because they were looking for certain qualities in the individuals they were bringing into the Navy. And I never really saw a list of those qualities, but whatever it was, I got in. Okay.
You must have met them.
Yeah, whatever it was, yeah. But it was wonderful. My 22 years or 23 years in the Navy, it was just absolutely wonderful.
Well, and we'll talk more about that. So when you were finishing your research paper on Jesse James and you saw that newspaper or that magazine, what was the plan if you hadn't seen that magazine?
I don't know, because I really didn't know at that point. I wasn't really thrilled with the Army, but I was thrilled with the Air Force and with flying, but I wasn't sure. And I was kind of like trying to be open, you know, to see what options I might really have, and I didn't know. Yeah.
So you passed all your aptitude and physical tests, and were now a member of the United States Navy.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about some of the places you were stationed or assigned.
Yeah. Well, when you go in the Navy flight training plane, you go to Pensacola, Florida, and you go through 16 weeks of pre-flight training down there, which is all basic, and you have some wonderful Marine drill instructors that are your new mothers that they're mother over you. I'm just being facetious, of course. But I mean, I did that. Then I went to flight training after that, and I went to Whiting Field, and I was there, and I went through 40 hours of flight training, and then I got the next station was at Quarry Field, and it was just going from one field to another.
And where were those places? Whiting Field and Quarry Field?
They were all in Pensacola. They were in
Okay.
Pensacola. And you just went from one thing to another thing to another thing. And then once you got through in Pensacola, which was the basic training command, the last thing you did, which was the most fun for me, was to go to a place called Quarry Field, which is in the suburbs of Pensacola. and you did formation flying, you did gunnery, you did bombing, and the last thing you did was carrier qualifications.
Carrier qualifications.
Yeah, you had, in order to be a naval aviator, you had to wear those gold wings. You had to go through basic, and you had to get 6 landings on a Saipan, which I did, and I've got a picture of that here. And it was the most thrilling thing in the world. I was flying an old SNJ, and I had more fun in the gunnery bombing, and in that phase I said, and this is for me, you know. And then I went to advance from that, and they put me in multi-engine advance, and I wasn't real happy with that, but that's okay.
Now, I've seen, you mentioned landing on the Saipan.
Yeah.
Obviously, in movies, I've seen landing on aircraft carriers, but
Yeah.
what is that really like?
Well, the one thing I'll say for the training program, each phase is a challenge, and you're going to have to pass so many things as you go through every phase of flight training. When I got to gunnery and bombing and QCQ, carrier quals, I felt like I was probably the hottest pilot in all of Florida. You know, and so they build confidence when you're doing that. You know, I never did anything. They never asked me to do anything that I didn't feel like I could do it. So the day that we all took off to go out to the Saipan and shoot our six landings out there, I thought, I've been waiting for this for 6 to 9 months. Right. You know, and it was more fun. I had more fun, and I loved every minute of it. It just went by too soon.
The other day, you were telling me about some of the early assignments you had, and one of them was patrolling the North Atlantic.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I wanted to go to a fighter attack squadron, and they sent me to a multi-engine squadron flying Super Constellations out of Argentia, Newfoundland, and it was a submission to put a radar barrier across the Atlantic Ocean. And so they had 3 destroyers out there, not together, but spaced across, from there to the Azores. So we would take off at Argentia, and we would go down 1,000 miles, and then turn left and go 150 miles up, turn left again 190 degrees, and fly back to Argentia at 2 different altitudes, lower altitude going down, higher altitude coming back. Every 6 hours, a Super Connie took off from Argentia, Newfoundland, to plug that radar barrier so that they couldn't make an attack on the United States.
They being the Russians.
The Russians, yeah. And it was like clockwork. It was the most. My squadron was home ported in Patuxent River, Maryland, but when I got ready to go up to Argentia, which I did rotate back and forth on a regular basis, I could land in Argentia up there and walk into the operations office. This was not computerized or anything, and they had a big chart up on the wall there, and I could tell you for the time I was going to be right up there, which is going to be about maybe 14, 15 days. I could tell you when I was going to be in the air every day, when I was going to be on the ground every day, and everything like that. And it was really kind of nice to be scheduled like that. It wasn't a nice place to be because it was a terrible weather up there, but it was nice to be scheduled. And I really feel like I grew a lot as an aviator up there, flying in the terrible weather and that sort of thing. And it was very hazardous, and we lost several airplanes while I was up there. But I felt like we were doing an important job, and it wasn't as thrilling as being on a carrier attack or a fighter pilot, but it was a very important job.
Now, describe that plane, the Super Connie?
Super Constellations, Lockheed aircraft. It was built to be a commercial airliner, and the Navy and the Air Force got a hold of it, and they modified it to be an aircraft that had radar equipment, all sorts of radar, and they could use that for the barrier and put a radar barrier across the whole North Atlantic Ocean. So, and it had a crew of 22, and you take off from Argentia, and you had 4-hour watch shifts on that thing, and you would fly about 12 hours before you got back to Argentia. So you had one shift on that airplane for 4 hours where you could rest or relax, and then one shift you'd be navigating, and then the other rest of the time I'd be up there in the cockpit flying. And it was very regimented and very organized, and sometimes very scary because the weather in the North Atlantic in the wintertime is very challenging.
Right.
Yeah.
You were describing when you were on those flights, what it was like to be up there and for how long you were up there.
Yeah. The flights were 12 hours each flight was, because you had a set track, a set altitude, and a set time. You took off here, and you made these various changes, and you were back in 12 hours later. You were back in Argentia, Newfoundland, And yeah, it was as regimented as it could be, but it had to be to provide that barrier.
Right, right. So over the course of your career in the Navy, I know you flew a number of different types of planes
Yeah.
and were stationed in a number of different areas of the world. I
Yeah.
mean, you mentioned
Yeah.
California and Morocco and
Yeah.
Bermuda, I believe. Was
Yeah,
a place.
yeah, yeah.
What were some of the other types of planes you flew?
Well, once I
assignments?
left the Super Connies, the way I worked this thing, I called my detailer and I said, if I extend for a year, will you send me to NAS Glencoe, Georgia, so I can get a jet transition? And he said, if you'll extend for a year, we'll do that. So I said, that's great. So I signed up for another year, and away I went. And I got down there, and I walked in, and the guy that was the executive officer said, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I said, wow. Why is that, Commander? He said, because we don't have any junior officers flying Super Connies. They're all old World War II pilots. And I said, what are you telling me? He said, well, I said, I didn't come down here to fly Connies. I came down here to fly the Banshee and to get a jet transition. He said, well, if you do a good job in the Connie outfit, you let me. Well, I left that day and went over and talked to the VF operations guy, who was the guy in charge of all the fireplaces.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a commander, but he had the mentality of an 18-year-old. I mean, I liked him. He was a fighter pilot's fighter pilot, but he was something else. And I said, is there any chance you can get me over here? He said, give me a week. And a week later, he called me and said, come over to my office. And I walked in and he said, this is a Banshee handbook. There's a test in here. It's an open book test. You read this whole thing. If you have any questions, let me know when the fighter pilots know, and they'll answer your questions. You'll do that, and then tomorrow you'll come back in here, and we're going to put you in the ejection seat, check out pressure, in a pressure, in a chamber, and what you had to do to qualify to fly at high altitude. And did all that kind of stuff. And then after that, the next day, we're going to put you down the flight line, let you start the airplane, and shut it down, and then that afternoon you're going to go fly it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. So that happened, and I loved it. I mean, I was out there. Here I was, all dressed up like a fighter pilot, and I thought I was something really big. And
how old were you then?
I was 22.
Okay.
Yeah. And the guys, my chase pilot was a neat guy. I got to know him real well. He was a lieutenant who had flown the Furies in the fleet, and he was a good guy, good level-headed guy. So we take off, and we're going down the runway, and he's right there on my wing. And we're going down the runway, and he says, I'd like for you to put some back pressure on your stick because we're going to run out of runway here pretty soon. So we took off, pulled our gear up there, and they started climbing altitude. And we went through a bunch of flights that we did up there. And I went through that phase of training for about maybe 4 or 5 flights, and then pretty soon I was assigned the regular Fortune Hunter flights up there, which was an intercept thing that we were training people going to the carriers to be intercept officers on the attack carriers. And so we were out there, we had bogies and friendly airplanes intercepting each other. And I did that for a year. And I really got a lot of good jet flying experiences there. And it was a great experience for me. And I was getting ready to get out of the Navy, and my detailer called me again, and he said, look, I've got a good deal for you. And when you do tell him he's got a good deal for you, you got to be really careful. And I said, what's that? I said, how would you like to go to Macon and be a recruiting officer? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, we'd like for you to go up there and be the all Navy recruiting officer for the state of Georgia. And I said, yeah, I think I'll do that. If I can go to Mercer University in the afternoon and on my own at night and try and finish getting my degree. And they said, well, you got to go up there and talk to them about that. So I went up there and talked to the captain up there, and he said, we can work that out. So I was not a regular officer yet. I'd applied for it, but I hadn't done that. So Barbara and I moved to Macon, Georgia, the Naval Recruiting Station in Macon. And she's going to Mercer University. She'd never been to college before, and she's going to Mercer, and I'm going to Mercer, and I'm getting college credit. And it was really great. We really liked it. And then I hadn't been there, I guess, 2 months, and I got selected for regular Navy. And as soon as that happened, I called my detailer, and I said, you know that I've got to get out of this job because you don't make promotions being a recruiting officer. But I mean, I'm going to do a good job while I'm here, but I want to get out of this job and I want to get back to flying. And he said, okay, that's fine. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to fly either attack or a fighter. And he said, oh no, you're a multi-engine trained pilot, and you're going to put you in. I said, don't tell me that. He said, yeah. He said, well, are you married? I said, yes. I said, you got insurance? I said, no. He said, how would you like to go to Bermuda? And I said, I don't think I have to check with my wife on that. So the next thing I had is a set of orders to a VP-49 in Bermuda. And I said, but wait a minute, I've never flown a seaplane in my life. I said, don't worry, we're going to send you to school on that. And that was my next tour of duty. And during that tour of duty, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred.
Yeah, tell me about your involvement in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, it was interesting because I just gotten in the patrol squadron, which was a seaplane squadron in Bermuda, and I was just starting to fly to get qualified in that airplane, and then all of a sudden the missile crisis, and I didn't know really what DEFCON was, defense condition was, until that happened, and it changed. You know, Bermuda is strictly a tourist place. I got up one morning and go down to go to work, and the whole flight line and everything else has got barbed wire all the way around it, and there are armed guards down there, and I'm thinking, and you know, there was no television for us. I said, what is going on? So I got to the office, and they said, well, something happened in Cuba. We'll tell you about it.
Right.
But you know, you can suit up. You're getting ready to fly to Cuba. I said, okay. And that's what happened. We went down there to be part of that blockade, which was part of one of the best tours of duty I ever had. And we were down there for probably a month the first time, and then it was a matter of half the squadron going down there, the other half until about 30 days. I mean, 4 months, and then the crisis was over when we finally. The president blocked the whole thing, and he said, "You know, you're sending your missiles out of here, or else it's going to be a war."
Right.
Literally, and we didn't know, and it was a scary time for people because we were putting stuff on our airplanes we'd never put on there before, you know, and we were doing stuff like that. And it was a real serious time, and everybody realized this is not a joke. This is really serious stuff. But it was a great thing to do because you could see those ships going back to Russia. You know, we were trailing them sometimes, and you could see that what the U.S. policy was working, and it changed that whole atmosphere down there. So that was a good tour for me because it was a good place for me to be at that time.
And what were you flying then?
I was flying the P-5M, which is a seaplane. And that airplane doesn't have any landing gear. You have gear that you put on there when you land, you'll taxi up, and they attach wheels on the side of the airplane and on the tail, and then they pull you up with a tractor out of the water, and there you are. And it was World War II and very primitive, but I loved that airplane. I really did. I mean, it was fun flying, and I did that for, 2 years. And my reward for doing it was that they selected me to go to Monterey, Navy postgraduate school.
Okay. And
I went out there and wore civilian clothes for 2 years and got my bachelor's degree in political science. And that was my next step in the career. So, and that was a great time.
So why political science?
Well, that was my choice, and I felt like I was more qualified for that. I was never an engineer type. And the only way I got through physics when I was going to Monterey was through Barbara's parents, my wife's parents. And she said many times before, you didn't have the aptitude for this, and you knew that. And she said, and my praying got you through.
Very good.
Yeah.
So you were in Monterey.
Monterey. Yeah.
How long were y'all out there?
For 2 years while I was getting my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And when I left there, I went back to the training command to be a T-28 formation training instructor. And when I found out I was going back there, I said, it's like throwing me into Briar Patch. That's great. And I got down there, and I met all kind of good guys that were down there because the Navy trains both Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard pilots. So we had a real mix. Plus, we had a bunch of foreign country pilots down there. And I absolutely love being a flight instructor, and I love very much being in that environment. And I excelled in that down there, and I had a good time doing that.
And where was that?
When?
Where?
That was at Whiting Field, in the Pensacola area. Yeah.
Backing up a little bit, so you were talking about your experience in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I know you had other military type assignments, but tell me more. Tell me about your time with NASA and the recovery teams you were on.
Okay. Well, when I was flying P-5Ms out of Bermuda and Guantanamo Bay. At that time, NASA had a certain amount of Navy resources. They had several ships and everything on it, aircraft carriers and that sort of thing. But they had resources that they wanted to use for recovery. And my first experience was when John Glenn made his orbit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was the first guy to make an orbit in space.
Right.
Well, I was on the second recovery place. And of course, he didn't ever come there, but I heard him on the radio as he was coming over talking to the people down in Mission Control, and it was like he was sitting in a rocking chair,
Really?
rather than the capsule that he was flying in.
Right.
And he was so cool and everything. And they were saying, "Well, the heat shield, we don't know about heat shield. It may be on, it may not be on, and we think it'll be okay. It'll probably burn up on recovery." And he was the not concerned about that one bit. And I thought, this guy's my hero. You know? So we were there, and we could have been part of the recovery team, you know, but that was just a backup. So then after that, the next time it happened was I was on a WASP. I was assigned a WASP, and we were assigned to some NASA recoveries when I was on the WASP. And one of them was Ed White and McDivitt when they did their first spacewalk.
Right.
And of course, Ed White was from Cartersville. And that was thrilling because we didn't have the whole air group on board, the carrier, which we weren't crowded. And we had but the only thing is we had media on there, and they were not the easiest people to work with. But anyway, it was a big media event. And when Ed White got out in that capsule, I was listening to that, and Cassie, I was a Cassie officer there, and I was listening to him talking, and he said, "This is so beautiful. I can." And McDivitt kept saying, "Ed, get back in the capsule. We got to get Ed, get back in the capsule." And McDivitt was a major in the Air Force, but he was an engineer. I mean, he had an engineer's mindset, and he kept saying, "Ed, I know you're having fun, but get back." Finally, he got him back in the cockpit, and he got in there. And when they were checking out at the capsule, they made a trip out to St. Louis, and when they were out there, McDivitt stopped them when they were going through the capsule, everything about the capsule, and he said, "I want you to show me how to take this lock on this capsule when we bring this hatch down. If something malfunctions, I want to be able to put it back together." Sure enough, they both got back in there, started to shut that thing down so they could go for recovery, and they couldn't get it done. And so McDivitt, while they were in orbit, took that thing apart, put it back together, and they closed it down and had a successful recovery. So I was part of that, and I really enjoyed that. And McDivitt and White are my heroes, and they always will be.
Did you ever get to meet them?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We got, because we were in the WASP, and they were there, and the captain, one night we had finished flight operations, and he said, "If you're interested, the astronauts are going to be in the wardroom for a half an hour talking to some of the pilots in there." And I said, "Are you kidding me?"
Just try and keep me out of there, right?
Yeah, right. So, and it was just wonderful meeting those people, and both of them are my heroes. And of course, my big hero, of course, was the guy, the Marine, who was a Marine who was the first guy to go into space. And so I had a little part in each one of those missions, and I'll never forget that.
Well, I guess shifting gears a little bit, but still during your Navy time, tell me about your service and your assignments in Vietnam.
Yeah, I was in a patrol squadron, and it's one of those very fortunate things again. When I went through Monterey, we were all Naval Aviation cadets, former Naval Aviation cadets, and we only had 2 years of college, so we were going to get our bachelor's degree. Well, one of my classmates was he was a flight deck officer on an attack carrier that was out there, and he left and got his degree about 3 or 4 months before I got my bachelor's degree. So he was back in Washington as a detailer. And when he left Monterey, he told our whole class, "You better want what you got, what you put on your preference card for your next duty station, because I'm going to be your detailer." And I knew he was, and so I called him up and I said, "Okay, look, I'm coming out of here. I'm a lieutenant. I want to be a department head. I want to be the ops officer of the squadron I'm going to. I want to be deploying to Vietnam, and I want to be flying P-3s." And he said, "Now, you sure you want that?" And I said, "Yeah." And I got everything I asked for, and that was the key to my getting promoted to commander, really, because that tour in Vietnam was the best operational tour I ever had in my whole career, and it was just perfect for me. I had great guys in my squadron, and I had a great time. And we had one problem. We had up there was one of our senior officers. While we were out there, was getting checked out, and they were coming back from a mission one night, and they flew into a tree.
Oh no!
So that's not good for your career.
No.
He was there probably maybe a week after that, and we never saw him again. And they were coming back from a night mission, flying a mission on patrol out there, and they were getting ready to come in, and we were flying from Utapao, Thailand, and the big people that were there with the Air Force were flying B-52s missions, and so they had priority over everything. And we were coming in to land, or he was at this time. And what happened was the Air Force pilot declared an emergency. He was about 30 miles out. And so then our guy said, well, because we had a directive that I put as the ops officer, I said, every night your night landing or on your deployment is going to be under radar control. Well, they said, you can violate that if it's VFR and it's good reasons, but generally every night landing you're going to be under radar. So they said, we're VFR, we can get in ahead of this B-52. And so I said, okay. And this guy was a weak pilot. He really was. So anyway, they came in, and he just was not watching what he was doing. And as soon as they got too low, he added power, and they flew through some trees and came in. Now I've just gotten back from a mission. I've been in the air for about 12 hours, and I'm having dinner at the officers club, which we had taken place. And the duty officer comes down. And I said, Barry, what's up? He said, you won't believe it. And I said, what? He said, the XO just flew into a tree. I said, that's really cute, Barry. You know, I'm really laughing. He said, no, I'm serious. That really happened. I said, you're kidding me. So I went down there, and it was a bad situation. And I won't go into all the details of it. He was immediately relieved, and and he was out of there. And then I was just the third senior officer, so they put me in this XO, which is a great break for me. I love that. And it was, so it worked out okay. But it was an embarrassment for the whole squadron, But and those kind of things happen. Sometimes people get put in positions that they really don't want to be there, and they really shouldn't be there. But the system has said, yes, you got to do this, so they do it, and it doesn't always work out well. And I'm not being critical of him or the Navy or anything else. That just happened. But it was a great break for me.
Right.
Yeah.
You were mentioning you flew the P-3 in Vietnam, and
Yeah.
you were telling me a little bit about that airplane. Describe what you were doing, what your assignment in the P-3 was in Vietnam.
Okay. The main thing the P-3 was designed to do was be an anti-submarine airplane.
Anti-submarine, okay.
Anti-submarine, yeah. And also it did maritime patrol, and that was the main thing we did over in Vietnam, because you were trying to track certain types of vessels to be able to maintain control over those sea lanes over there. And so that's what we were doing, and we were focusing on what was called an SL-5 and SL-4 ship that was it was a patrol vessel that was designed by the Chinese, and that they were manned by Chinese crews, and they were supposed to, maintain control of the sea lanes over there. And so our job was to detect them, and if they ever went inside the 12-mile limit, then we'd call an attack aircraft, and they would sink them. So that was the deal there, and it was pretty important to do something like that. So I enjoyed that. Sometimes it was not much fun, because we got back to Moffett from being on patrol over there for 6 months on deployment, and we were sending our crews back home, and they had patrol cars at Moffett Field. I thought, what's going on there with security and all like this? And I said, well, we had some demonstrators here at the gate, anti-war demonstrators, and they may be trying to sabotage the airplanes. And I'm thinking, this is Moffett Field, California, this is the United States, and we're having to do something like this at home. And it wasn't that way when we left to go over there. So it was a kind of a sad time. The squadron was wonderful that I was in. The guys that I had working for me, the young lieutenants I had working for me, really responded to the way my philosophy of running the squadron and everything. And I would tell them, you got a job. You know what your job is. You got a department head. You work through the chain of command. What you do is you do your job. That's what we're here to do. We're not going to be hassling you on anything else. And they responded. These were all the young guys. It was their first squadron tour for them, and it was just a thrilling thing for me to see how We're giving you this responsibility. I'm not going to be breathing down your neck. I'm going to expect you to do the job. And they responded in a wonderful way. That was one of the most encouraging things, to see how if you give somebody responsibility and you back off and let them do their responsibility, it really works real well. And that squadron just matured, and those guys did a magnificent job, and they got recognized for that in Vietnam for doing that. And I learned from that a great deal. And I don't share this with many people, but when I got back from that deployment over there, which is typical at Moffett Field, I got selected for commander while I was over in Vietnam. And so the next thing for me to do was the career thing, was a Washington thing. Go to Washington,
right.
you know, be a desk jockey. So the guy from my detailer came out there and he said, okay, you're looking good. You had a good tour out here. You're tracking for command, you're tracking for commander, and you already made commander. I said, okay, where am I going to go from here? He said, we want you to go to Washington to a desk job. And I said, Chuck, I don't want to go to Washington to a desk job. And he said, hey, if you want to make captain, if you want to go, you're looking good. I said, read my lips. I don't want to go to Washington. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go back to the training command. I want to be in a T-28 unit again, and I want to be a training officer. He said, that's going to ruin your career. I said, Chuck, read my lips, ruin my career. So anyway, I got my orders that I wanted back to VT3, a T-28 training officer down there. And I thought, man, I told Barbara, I said, I couldn't be happier. And I got messages and I got phone calls from guys that had been in squadrons with me before. And one of them was a training officer down there, and the other one was the senior standardization officer. And we'd all flown in formation instructors before. And the guys, they said, these guys are waiting for you to get, they can't wait for you to get down here. And so I went down there as a training officer down there, and I had 1 or 4 years down there with guys that I'd flown with before, young lieutenants and everything, and all of us had a great time together. And then from there, I went overseas again. But anyway, the point to me is, the beautiful part of the Navy is, you do your job, you work hard, and you get rewarded for it. And they don't care who your daddy was. They don't care if you came from money or if you come from a poor family. They want to know one thing: can you do your job, and can you do a good job of doing that? And that's what makes you successful in the Navy.
So, following up on that, what's the life lesson there that you brought with you into your next phase of life? What did you learn from the Navy that you carried with you?
Well, it just, the one thing I learned was you got to have faith in the people that work for you, because the people that work for you are going to make you or break you. And you got to have faith in them, and you got to be conscientiously looking out for their careers more than you're looking out for your own career, and trying to help them and to do everything you can so that they can make that next promotion. And then the other thing you got to do is you got to do everything you can to get the job done in the training command, because you're training naval aviators, and you've got a high standard, and you've got to maintain that high standard. And if you do a good job, you get the reward. And it doesn't make any difference, where you came from, who your parents were, or anything like that. What makes the difference is, are you motivated and you do a good job? And that's the way it should be in life.
Right. Very good. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you. It was my privilege.
So we'll back up a little bit. Tell me about when and where you met Barbara.
Well, I had just gotten into this, I had my wings, and then I was going, into to my first squadron. And I'm going to tell you the whole story here. We met each other at a Baptist church that my family and I grew up in. And she was a little girl from the country that had come up there, and she was going to that church. And so I called this lady who ran the social thing up there for the young people, Kaka. She was she and her husband were wonderful. I said, Kaka, I got my wings, I'm coming home, and it's time for me to choose a wife. I'm very romantic. So she said, okay. So anyway, I got home, and they had about 5 girls that were in that church group, youth group lined up. and Barbara was number one. I never got beyond her, and I was on leave for 21 days, and I took her out every night except one. That one night she said, I got to wash my hair, and I can't go out tonight.
She used the washing hair excuse.
Yeah, right. But I mean, we hit it off immediately to begin with, and it was no doubt to me, this is my kind of girl.
And when did you get married?
We got married in 1958, and I was a JG. I was a Super County squadron. We moved to Tuxet River, Maryland. That was my first squadron, and we started our married life up there.
And when were your children born?
Both of our children were our adopted children, and both of them were born in Massachusetts. And we found out we couldn't have children, so we started working in different places. And I couldn't. State of Georgia laws were such that I couldn't adopt a child from down here, which was really kind of ridiculous to me. So we went to a place in Boston, because that's where I was home ported then. And we asked them, and said, can we be considered for children? I said, absolutely. We're here to get a child matched with some good parents. Mm-hmm. So our first child was our daughter Lisa, and we adopted her. And then we said, no. They said, we got other children on the unit. I said, not right now. We'll get started on this. Let us get started in this thing. Right. But before we leave here, and it's just tour of duty, so we were back. And we went back and said that, yeah, they did. And it was a remarkable personal story. We said, what do you want? I said, well, we want a little boy, and we've already named him. Whenever he comes, he said, okay, fine. So they started giving us correspondence back and forth. I was in California, and then finally one day we got a letter in the mail that said, we got a little boy from you, and his name is David. And I thought, this is providential. So sure enough, we got him, and he was about, 3 weeks old, I guess 4 weeks old. And he has been my perfect son ever since then. And now he works for Shaw Industry and graduated from Georgia Tech, which pleased his father a whole bunch. And Lisa's also graduated and got her master's degree, and she's in social work. And I've told her, I said, I don't see how, she's not in social work anymore. When she was doing that, I said, I don't see how you can do that. I don't see how you can do with working with parents that are not responsible. And I admire you for doing it. I don't see how. But anyway, those are our two children.
Well, I know you're proud of both your children and your grandchildren, and if we have time, I'll ask you more about them. I'd like to hear more about what they're involved in and your pride for them. Let's shift gears a little bit. I really want to talk about your time here in Cartersville in Bartow County. Your second career, I suppose you can call it.
Yeah, it is.
You got out of the Navy.
Yep.
And you spent some time teaching at North Cobb High School. Yeah,
I was at North Cobb High School. I told Barbara, I said, I want to get one of these NROTC jobs. And she said, you're a retired Navy commander, and you're going to be working with teenagers. Have you lost your mind? I said, no, I have not lost my mind. This is going to be wonderful. She said, you kidding me? Of course, she's in college. She's been in college ever since we've been married, working on her degrees and everything. So she said, I don't know whether you want to be doing this or not. I said, okay, well, I do want to be doing that. And what I did was I went to Cobb County, to North Cobb High School, and I'd drive by there, and I'd look at those kids going in and out of there, and I'd talk to some people that taught down there. And I said, that's where I want to go. So I contacted the Navy in Charleston, and I said, when is the next time the guy's going to be rotating out of the North Cobb? I said, I think, we don't have any notification yet, but it may be this summer. So then I went down to see the personnel director at Cobb County, and I said, I want that job in North Cobb. He said, I don't even know if the captain that's there now is going to go. I said, I know him, and I've talked to him. He's not going to be there. He said, we don't have a formal letter or anything, and this is Jerry Ingram, and I really learned to really like Jerry. He said, I can't make a commitment to you now, but if you want North Cobb, I'll let you know. Sure enough, it worked out. I was interviewed by the principal at North Cobb, and I didn't know at the time he interviewed me that he was going to go to the headquarters there in Cobb County, but he had been a good principal, and I got a good interview with him. So they hired me, and I went to North Cobb High School. And I'll tell you what, I was the most happy guy in the world. Those were wonderful kids. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with them. They were like my children. And the faculty accepted me. And I told the principal when I got this, now look, I'm not coming in here just to be an ROTC instructor. I'm trying to transition into the education profession. So if you give me some extracurricular things to do, well, the first thing he did was a 10-year study. And I didn't have any idea what that meant. But I met 3 ladies there that were leaders at the time. One of them was a vice principal, and she was number 2 in North Cobb. One of them was a counselor, and one of them was my department head, and I was in the science department. And so we were going to do the 10-year study. We were going to lead that. And I learned more about education with those 3 women, and they took me under wing. And I was there before we started school the first year I was there. And Ms. McLeod called me into her office, and she said, "Now, Commander, you're not going to have perfect children in your unit." I said, "I understand that, Ms. McLeod." She said, "But if you ever have a problem with a child, you let me know, and they'll be out of your class that day." I said, "Okay." And I told those kids that. I said, "I'm not going to be hard to get along with. All I want you to do is what I tell you to do. If we can work together, we're going to have a good time," which we did. And then the counselor was a great friend of mine. I got to be a good friend of my wife because she was in counseling. And then my department head was the most tough science teacher you'd ever want to meet. She was a chemistry teacher, but she loved those children. And she had the scars on her faces where one day a little girl was messing around with a chemical, and she bit it, and it spilt, and it splashed up on her. And she got it off those kids before she got it off herself, and she had scars on her face to show it. But she was a dedicated, wonderful teacher. And those people took me in. The football coach took me in as a buddy. The baseball coach took me in because I was there to be, and I was a North Cobb guy, the whole time I was there. And that's what the kids wanted, and that's what I wanted. And it was the best transition I ever had. And after 5 years of doing that, something else opened up.
Was it during this 5 years that you went back to Georgia State and got your master's?
I did that actually before I got out of the Navy. Yeah, I was going to Georgia State to get my master's degree in education. Yeah, and they knew that, and everybody worked with me on that, and what out my job and everything else. And I ended up getting my master's degree from Georgia State. They took me in. They didn't have to do that, but they took, and I really was accepted. And it was the most wonderful experience in the world. And the 3rd year I was there, I was a teacher of the year. Yeah, and it was. This comes back to a core belief that I have. Attitude is everything. If you got the right attitude about a job, if you got the right attitude about life and how it should be, you're going to be successful. And that's what. It's not so much how much talent you've got, but it's how much dedication you've got, and it's also your attitude about the job and trying to do the right thing. We had an assistant principal at North Cobb, Emery Sewell, who was a hero. He was a former head football coach down there, and he was a football genius, but he was also a fine Christian man. And he kept saying over and over to those kids, if everybody would do the right thing, there wouldn't be any problems. Now that's so simplistic. But he was wise beyond his years. He's dead now, but the whole time I was there, he was one of my heroes. He was fair to every child. He'd take those childs in and talk to them individually in his office about a problem that they were doing, and he would listen to them, and he would try and help them. And he always told his kids, look, if everybody would do the right thing, there wouldn't be any problems.
So after your 5 years at North Cobb, tell me about the job description that you were handed.
Oh, my wife came home one day from school, and she was getting her master's degree, and she had this job description that they were going to get a person that they were going to call the director of financial aid. And she said, read over this, and I said, okay. And so I read over it. She said, well, about 2 days later, she said, well, what do you think? I said, I think I'm going to apply for that job.
and tell us where the job was.
It was director of financial aid.
Here in Cartersville.
It was in Cartersville High School, and it was a new creation, and it really didn't have much in the job description. It was very, very vague, and so I want that. I think I can do a good job at that. I got interviewed, and I got selected, and I got hired.
Y'all moved to Bartow County at that time?
Oh, we were already
living here.
We were already here. Yeah.
So the job that you got here in Cartersville, that was about early '80s.
Yeah.
1982.
Yeah.
That job, that's the job that then grew into the Etowah Foundation.
Yeah,
Etowah
because
Education Foundation.
they put this thing out about they wanted to hire a director of financial aid, and that's the thing that my wife brought home, that job advertisement, and that's the one I said, I'm going to apply for that job. And I guess they felt like I had some of the things they wanted. You know, the superintendents were on the selection thing, and some of the principals and that sort of thing, and it was, to me, it was a God thing, because that's exactly what I wanted. That's why I didn't get out of the Navy because I didn't like it, but I liked it. But I wanted to get in that high school environment, and I wanted to be an instructor with those kids as a naval science instructor, because that was the next step for me to move on up to get into administration.
So tell me, what was the idea behind the Adult Education Foundation?
The idea was that we were to create an atmosphere there to promote scholarships for kids, regardless of what their background, their family background was. But they were people that had the ability and aptitude, encourage them to go ahead and go into college. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea was, if we're going to do this, and I was there for about maybe a year, almost a year, and I went to my directors and I said, now look, what we need to do is we need to modify this thing a little bit, and not just advise these kids, but what we need to do is there's a lot of people giving money in the foundations, I know, in the community to kids, and I said, but there's no organization to it. There are good organizations within the community, the Optimist Club and people like that. So what we need to do is have an organization to promote that, and I'd like to create that, and I'd like to create it as a nonprofit. And fortunately, we had a very good donor here in the community, a good business person. They said, well, I'll fund this thing to begin with. And both the superintendents, as soon as somebody, you know how educators are, somebody said, we want to do this, and somebody else says, well, I'll fund it. They'll find a place to do it, you know. Mm-hmm. So it was backed by both superintendents. It was backed by the community, and it was backed by a wonderful donor, and I just happened to fall into it. I was very fortunate to get selected for that job, and I had a lot of community support from a lot of different people, organizations in the community, and they're the ones that made it successful, plus the people that worked there. Now, I had the best people working for me in this community, and they were loyal to that job and loyal to that foundation and loyal to try and raise those scholarship funds. And it was just a wonderful organization to work for, because the staff was so dedicated, and they could see the good that they were doing in the foundation.
Mm-hmm. So how did it, day to day, how did it work? You were counseling students, you were looking for scholarships and financial aid and those kinds of things? I'm
not into it as much as I would like to be, but when I can, I try and do things to support them.
Well, back when you were, in those early days,
how did I do it?
The work
well, what I felt like I had to do to begin with in that job was they needed to know that my only real interest in what I was doing was helping those kids. And that was what I was dedicated to doing. I didn't care what their family background was or anything like that. If they had what I felt like was a good motivation, and that was my whole thing. And I probably shouldn't do this, and you can edit this out if you want to. My one person that is my hero is Dr. Word, and he came out of the Air Force one of the second year or so I was there. Came to me, somebody said, and I said, what do you want to do? He said, I think what I want to do is I want to get a job so I can get me a car. And I told him, I said, oh, how long is that car going to last? He said, oh, I don't know. I said, how long would an education last you? Well, I never thought of it that way before. That guy was the most motivated person I've ever known, and he came in and he worked with me, and he was out of the Air Force. He'd been in the Air Force for 4 years. He started at college, and he went to school to begin with at West Georgia, and he met the financial aid people over there we introduced him to, and he became their hero. He was so motivated to do this, and he had all kind of special jobs over there on campus to help finance himself as he was going through there. Well, today he's Dr. Word. He's an assistant principal at Cartersville Middle School. Mm-hmm. And he's still as positive as he can be. And we're still friends, and I see him every now and then, and He's an inspiration to me because he's a leader and he's a self-made man, and that's what the foundation is all about. And I can tell you thing after thing after thing of people that we've known, and I think that not me, but just me and the staff have helped, and they have blossomed in going to school and getting an education and becoming a professional person.
How would you describe the growth of the foundation from when you started over the course of the 20 years you were there? I mean, how did it grow under your leadership?
Well, it grew much faster than I ever thought it would. It really did. I mean, the community accepted the concept. The community accepted what we were trying to do. And we had great people in this community. That's why I love Cartersville so much. I mean, I'm not here because I was born. I'm here because I selected this as where I was going to retire, raise my children, and I love this community and I love everything about it. Now, it's not perfect, but I'm up there. There's more good people. And I told the staff when I started hiring people, you'll never make a lot of money here. I can't guarantee you that's not going to happen. But you'll never have a job where you'll get as much satisfaction as you'll get out of working with these kids. And they bought into that, and it made it successful. And that's what made it successful with the staff. We had a great staff, a good philosophy, and hard-working people.
Where did the name Etowah Foundation, or Etowah, I think it was Education Foundation?
Yeah, well, it was Etowah Foundation to begin with, and then we changed the name to Etowah Education Foundation, yeah.
And today it's the Etowah Scholarship Foundation.
Yeah, it's Etowah Scholarship Foundation, yeah.
Where did that name come from?
Well, it just came from the Etowah Indians. That was part of the community here, and that was part of the base here, and so we thought we liked that. We liked that Native American heritage and that sort of thing, and that's a good name for this community. And that's what it's made its name that way.
Who were some of those early advocates or proponents of the whole scholarship and counseling idea?
Oh yeah, that's the fun part of it to me. Was I had to go to some places, and here I am. I'm not a native from Bartow County or anything, and I'm talking to all these wonderful people from Bartow County, and I'm thinking, I don't know if they're going to accept me or not. One of the first groups I went to was the Service League, and I'm not going to name the lady. He was the head of the Service League then, and she said, we don't know if we're going to give you this money or not. And I said, well, I want you to learn to trust us because you're very loyal to this community and what you do. She said, and she's a sweet lady, but she said, if you ever screw up, you'll never get another nickel from us. I said, I'm a retired naval officer. I don't understand that kind of talk. And I said, I'm glad you feel that way about it, and I hope I'll earn your confidence.
Right.
They have given a scholarship every year since the foundation, and they're one of the leading first donors, and that was one of the most important donations we got to begin with for the community to say, we've got confidence in this organization. And another one is Morgan Aiken, who was on our board of directors, and his brother was an educator here from Floyd Junior College. Those kind of people came in and supported what we were doing, and it made all the difference in the world to the staff of the foundation and to the community. And that's how we got it. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And then, it just, one thing after another opportunity would come up. One of the best things we ever had happen for us was to create this thing called scholarship sharing. Now, they have kind of let that fall by the wayside. But that was something that was embraced right away. That was, if you get a scholarship from the foundation and you go to Georgia Tech or you go to Georgia Highlands, whatever it is, when you go there, if you got a foundation scholarship, that college will match it dollar for dollar. And that generated a whole bunch of money. And the beauty of that is we never had to account for that money. I mean, we took the money in and we put it in an account, and we put the money over to the colleges, and they paid the students. But, we didn't have to go out there and keep raising money. We were raising money, to get the match scholarship. But it was a very popular program, and there's nowhere else in the United States like that. No community has anything quite like that. And in the last year that I was there, it was unbelievable how much those matching dollars were worth, but it was very high.
Yeah, I believe they give a couple hundred scholarships, today, each year.
Yeah.
What was when you left, how many scholarships? Do you remember how many scholarships they were given each year?
I'm not a big numbers person.
But it obviously grew.
Yeah, it grew every year, and it's grown every year from the very beginning. And we just had our honors the 35th anniversary, and there again. Now my wife could tell you the numbers, but I'm not a numbers person. But it's amazing to me how much money's been generated, and it has made an impact in this state, and it's made an impact in the Southeast. A lot of these other high schools and colleges are saying, "How did all this happen in Cartersville?" Well, it all happened because of the people of Cartersville. The people of Cartersville are interested in the young people, and they're interested in education. And that's a blessing to this community that so many people in this community are that way.
I know the initial theory and idea behind the foundation was with working with students on counseling them in post-high school endeavors and scholarships. When did the foundation and why did it branch into other areas of education, dealing with arts and cultural endeavors?
Yeah, it was an evolutionary thing. We felt like there was a need there. Could we get support to do these, branch out into the other areas? And once we got encouragement and support from the community, that we would do that sort of thing. So we're not going to limit ourselves to a certain area, and that was all. Anytime we could find some program or some way of raising money or helping kids get through school, that's what we wanted to do. And that was kind of we were open to doing things that were out of the box, so to speak. And that's what we wanted to do. We were there to help children and families of children to get education. And whatever we could do to advance that cause is what we tried to do.
So what were some of those things? I know that like the Science Center came out of that, the History Center.
History Center, the Science Center, TELUS, all of those things, grew from that concept, And so the idea, of course, after the History Center was there's a lot of artifacts here. We need to have a museum. So that was it. And so the Bartow History Center is there, and that's a very wonderful organization, a wonderful place, and TELUS and everything out there, having the art programs that we have, having the museum facilities we have. There's no other community that I know of in the United States that has the things we have. Now, we've had some anonymous donors that have been very, very supportive of what we've done. And they've done it because they wanted to see what was going on here, and they saw what we were doing and how it was affecting the community and people here. And so success breeds success. And if you see a need and you can meet it and you do it well and you got a dedicated staff, you got the ingredients.
So when you first started, did you ever imagine, what that initial idea did you ever imagine it would grow into what it was when you left?
No.
When you retired?
I had no idea it would grow like that. I really didn't.
TELUS recently named their planetarium in your honor.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
A total shock. That's something I never expected. I never thought that would ever happen, and it was a big honor to me. And I don't know what more that could have been done for me than doing that, because this whole thing has been a blessing to my life, because I feel like I've done something here that's been worthwhile. And it's not me, it's the people in this community that are doing it. And it's also the staff of the foundation that's doing it. And they're very dedicated. They're not, and I told everybody, including yourself, when you come in here, if you're expecting the big money or anything like that, it's not going to happen. I can't do that. We can't afford to do that. But if you want satisfaction, job satisfaction, you're going to find it here. You're going to find the work that you're doing is blessing this community and blessing the children of this community, and you're going to find a lot of satisfaction in that. And that's been my case.
I agree. I remember that conversation.
Okay, good.
But I'm still here.
Yeah, okay.
Lots of satisfaction. But so, I'm thinking about the TELUS honor that they gave you through the naming of that planetarium. It's kind of like, coming full circle. You had a career in the Navy and flying and working with astronauts in NASA, and now the science, or what became what was the Science Center becoming TELUS and the planetarium. That's got to be a great honor.
Well, I have one big basic philosophy, and you were a part of my staff, and you've heard this over and over again. And and it's really important to me because I really think it's an essential part of my life. Attitude is everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got the right attitude about life, you've got the right attitude about your job, you will be successful. If you don't have a positive attitude, and I'm not talking about phony baloney, I'm talking about a genuinely dedicated person to their job and their profession. And that's been the reason the Etowah Foundation has been successful. We've been blessed by one significant donor who's been most generous and most from the very beginning, and that was a big boost for us. But the other thing is the people that work for the foundation on a daily basis and have worked for the foundation has been what made it successful. And they're just dedicated as they can be, and they're great people. And if you don't come in there feeling like attitude is everything and it's important to what you're doing, you're not going to fit into that group. But if you do, you're going to find a home.
Mm-hmm.
That's my philosophy. And it's not me, and it's not any one other person, and it's not any one donor, but it's an atmosphere or an attitude that the thing has been built around. That's what's made us great. It's the good people who come in there and dedicated themselves to it, and they're never going to get rich, and they're never going to be famous, but they're going to say, I made a difference in somebody's life.
So how long were you at the foundation?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
20 years.
And looking back over your 20 years at the Etowah Foundation and then your career in the Navy, what are you most proud?
What now?
What are you most proud of from your?
I'm proud of the scholarships. I'm proud of the kids that have gotten the opportunity to get into life and to have an opportunity to get an education and be better prepared to go on. And I'm proud of them that have taken that. And I'm proud that we've made that opportunity available to a lot of people. There are several people I did more counseling when I first started the foundation than I did later on. But I could sit down and talk to these kids, and I could say, what do you really want to do? What are you really interested in? And a lot of them, nobody had ever asked that question before. What do you really want to do? Well, I don't know. Well, what are you going to do about not knowing? You know, and it wasn't done as an accusable way. It was saying, you've got some talent, you got some abilities. You're going to help people that want to help you. You're going to have to help them by saying, I'm going to work and find out what I really do want to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't think our attitude in the foundation was, we're here to help you, but you got to help yourself. And I don't. A lot of times in the educational system, you got really great teachers teaching real well, but they can't come in for some reason into the personal contact with that kid and say, I'm also here to offer encouragement to this child, and also here to try and say, you got a great potential, and you need to realize what that potential is. And that the kids need to hear that over and over again. You got a great potential. Now what you got to do is realize what that potential is.
Well said. Just to sort of wrap things up, what has the Cartersville, and you've alluded to this, but what has Cartersville and Bartow County meant to you and your family?
It's my home now. I am so comfortable here. I retired here intentionally. I wasn't born here. I was born in Atlanta, and I was raised in Atlanta, and I went to Grady High School, and I went to North Georgia College. Then I went into the Navy, and the Navy broadened my horizons a whole lot. And all those things are positive factors. But the thing that means the most to me is that I found Cartersville. I found a community and a group of people who had a lot of the same values that I had, and had some hope for the kids, and wanted to work in life to try and make things better for these people. And there's a lot of people in this community that way. Mm-hmm. It's not perfect, but I wouldn't live anywhere else. I didn't just happen to fall in here out of luck. I looked for it, I found it, and I've tried to do my part working in the community, and I've been blessed by it, and I'm just thrilled with what I had. And we just had this recent honors night, and we got a new director, and she did that honors night, and she did the whole thing, read every name, and never mispronounced a name, and they did the whole thing in less than an hour. And that never happened before, has it, Ernestine? And I didn't believe it was possible. I told her the other day at lunch at the Rotary Club, I said, I didn't think that was possible. But it's grown because the people are dedicated to it. And it's the people that makes a difference. It really is.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, I've enjoyed our conversation this morning.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed you being here, and I've enjoyed sharing this. And I just want to thank Bartow County and the people of Bartow County for being who they are. I'm not saying this is a perfect community, but it sure is a great place to raise your family, and it's a great place to work.
Well, I've learned a lot from you, and I've enjoyed the conversations we've had leading up to this, and I appreciate your time and for doing this for the
Well, I'm glad to do it, and it's been a privilege for me to be here and to be able to maybe serve the community and to a certain extent.
We've learned a lot, and I think you've had a great career here, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much. It's been my privilege to be here, my privilege to serve in this community, and I really love this community.